It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to today's session of the Leadership Lectureship Series. We have the privilege of having Dr. Krishnaram Kenthapadi, an esteemed alumnus of IIT Madras, who graduated with a BTech in Computer Science in 2001. He currently serves as the Chief Scientist, Clinical AI at Oracle Health, where he leads AI initiatives that are shaping the future of healthcare. Over the years, Dr. Krishnaram has played key roles at Fiddler AI, Amazon AWS AI, and LinkedIn, driving efforts in AI safety, trust, and responsible innovation. He was also a part of Microsoft's Aether Advisory Board on AI ethics, and earlier worked as a researcher at Microsoft Silicon Valley. A true researcher and innovator at heart, he holds over 150 patents and has published more than 60 papers and is a frequent speaker at global conferences. His academic journey took him from IIT Madras to a PhD in computer science at Stanford, and his professional journey reflects a deep commitment to using AI responsibly and meaningfully. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Krishnaram Kenthapadi.
For the kind introduction, and thank you all for joining today, and thanks to those who may be watching the live stream or recording afterwards. It's a great honor and privilege to be back at the campus, and I have been waiting for an opportunity or an excuse to come back to this beautiful campus, and today has been fantastic. Uh, so today I'm going to share some thoughts and perspectives on what I have learned over the years, uh, more like things that I wish somebody had told me when I was finishing my BTech, or just before starting my work, or in the early years of work. So that's the spirit I'm going to take and share some thoughts. Many of these might be perhaps familiar to you, or maybe things that you may have known already. But I just wanted to reinforce in case there is something that you may not have heard before, and hope it triggers some thoughts and reflections. So the talk is going to be structured roughly along maybe four aspects. I'm going to focus a little bit on what I really mean by this notion of startup within you or startup of you. Then go a little bit into like this notion of risk versus reward, like the notion of taking intelligent risks, not being risk averse, being willing to go out of what you're familiar with or what you're comfortable with, and so forth. And then kind of some notion around what I have heard around grit or persistence, and kind of finally like share some thoughts on what the emerging AI technologies and their impact could potentially be with respect to, say, career for all of us. All right, so let me start with the first one. When I joined LinkedIn back in 2014, we were all given two books on the very first day. And this was one of the books. This is a book written by Reid Hoffman, who is a LinkedIn co-founder. And the book focuses on this notion of startup of you. So the kind of the key takeaway from the book is to view your career as a startup. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and found a startup. It means that kind of think of a notion of permanent beta. Like beta refers to maybe when there is a new product, you just say that it's in a beta stage. It's not perfect, but it's out there, like you're improving it based on user feedback. So likewise, think of your career also as in permanent beta. It's kind of like your learning is never complete. You're always learning, always kind of learning from mistakes and doing things better the next time, and so forth. And the same applies for skill set as well. So there is no notion of skills. It's no notion of skills that you have completely acquired, and there is no need to acquire more skills. But this notion of constantly learning, and closely related to that is the notion of willingness to learn and adapt to changes in the market realities, the changes in skills that become more important, skills that might kind of not be as important as they were in the past, and so forth. And And the last part, close to Reed's heart, is this notion of professional network. Of course, he kind of fundamentally believes in that, and that's the reason he started LinkedIn after all, and the rest is history. So let's go more into this. Like this is the kind of the outline of some of the chapters in this book. Although this book was written perhaps about 2 decades back, or at least more than 15 years back, I think many of these things are still relevant today. And some of the aspects here, I'm going to argue, are even more relevant in the context of AI technologies. So the first point is around this notion of all humans are entrepreneurs. I think this is a quote attributed to Muhammad Yunus, who is the behind the Grameen movement in Bangladesh. Um, and let's kind of go a little bit more into this, right? So what do we mean by this notion of permanent beta? So this means that you're always kind of improving. So you're always like a work in progress. You kind of invest in making yourself better every day. So this can be in many forms. Maybe you're learning something new. You're meeting somebody and learning something from what they have learned or what they are doing, and this is something that you may not have otherwise heard of before. And this happens to me from time to time. Like even just earlier this week, I was meeting somebody who uh, works on the Vande Bharat trains, and he was kind of educating me on some of the challenges, technical challenges involved in building the Vande Bharat coaches, where there's no separate engine coach, and how to kind of incorporate differential gears and things like that. So there's always something that you can learn, and you never know when something you learn is going to be useful. Especially because many of the areas which used to be very distinct in the past are kind of like becoming closer together. Things are becoming more interdisciplinary and so forth. So the second point here is this notion of willingness to learn and adapt. You can kind of think of roughly like at least 3 different dimensions. So in the diagram on the right, uh, the assets refers to your skills. The like what skills you think you are good at, what skills you have learned, and so forth. And aspirations are maybe what you're passionate about. And the third is around market realities, meaning what the market really cares about. So ideally, like in an ideal world, we would have all of this completely overlapping. Uh, you are really good at things that you're passionate about, and the market, meaning the rest of the world, really cares about those. But in kind of most practical or real world situations, that's never the case. The key is how can you create as big of an intersection as possible. Um, and the point I learned reading from this book is that if you think of these as sets, these sets are not static at all. Like, of course, it's very clear that market realities changes over time. The skills that countries or companies or world markets cared about 20 years back are very different from the skills that they care about today. The important point I want to emphasize is that the one on the bottom left, assets, is something also which is not static. Sometimes, like, we may be tempted to think that uh, I'm good at X, but I'm not good at Y. There is a saying that for any such phrasing, you can always add the phrase yet. So this is something that in one of the trainings we were taught while I was at LinkedIn. They gave us the I don't know what it's called, the one where you kind of drop the ball and pick up. And kind of course, many of us were not good at that. The point is that as you practice something like that, which you're not likely you're not good at already, and you're not doing it every day, you can eventually become better and better. So this is true of technical as well as non-technical skills. This is true of skill, even aspects like building empathy, kind of learning some of the non-technical aspects, which are often as important or even more important than technical skills. So even that assets quadrant, of course, can evolve over time. And the even the aspirations, those also typically change over time. If you recall what you wanted to become when you were 5 years old or 10 years old, chances are that that's very different from what you aspire today. And chances are very much that I can bet that maybe at the pace at which things are changing, if you reflect 10 years from now or 5 years from now, what you want to become could be further different. So kind of like the key is there are definitely trade-offs between this. So trade-offs in the sense of if you are passionate about something, but if you're not really good at that, or if you're not taking steps towards becoming good at that, then just focusing on that aspirations alone is not the best. You may, like, I may want to be a, let's say, a musician, but I today, right now, I don't think I have the right skills to become that. Maybe I can put a lot of effort and move towards that, but that's going to be an extremely uphill task. So kind of like keeping that in mind. So not just focusing on any one of these dimensions, but kind of looking at all of this is what the book emphasizes. So likewise, sometimes we may be tempted to just go for market realities, meaning just go for the branch or the job that pays the most. But if that is something that we are not passionate about, that's something that we don't enjoy doing, that's chances are that that's not sustainable in the long run. So either you may get burnt out, or you may kind of be doing that for the sake of doing it. So kind of finding some reasonable intersection across these three would be desirable. Like, things are not going to be perfect, but either moving your aspirations towards things that the market cares about, that is a strategy that I have often followed. Like, the way I kind of reconcile that or explain to myself is that if the market really cares about something, meaning if the companies and rest of the society cares about something, chances are that that is going to be important, right? If some role is not important, the society will not care about that. And so long as you have the mindset that you want to do impactful things, you want to do things that make a difference to others, you can kind of orient your aspirations towards things that the market really cares about. So that may be one way of at least kind of creating larger overlap between the aspirations and market realities. Of course, the assets is something, as I kind of alluded to before, you can always learn new things. There is no reason to ever think that you cannot become good at something. You can always add that phrase, add that word yet to that, and you can eventually become better and better. So kind of like, again, like some things that in case I did not emphasize already, be kind of cognizant of the changes in the market realities. So I'm going to come back to this later in the talk, but let's take a simple example, especially today in the light of large language models and other generative AI models. Say around the time I graduated from IIT Madras, if you are really good at technical skills, right? If you are really good at, say, let's say, coding, or if you're really good at math and maybe quantitative trading or analysis and so forth, but you are kind of wanting to work completely by yourself, the society really valued that. Meaning that if you are kind of just a one-person army where you're not good at working with others, or you're not kind of you don't care about interacting with others, you don't care about communicating and articulating why what you do is important to others in the team, that was still valuable, because those kind of highly technical skills were very much valued by the society. But if you reflect on the world today, I think that those kinds of skills will become less and less valuable, because many of the AI models are becoming better and better at doing fairly advanced, sophisticated tasks. Even a few months back, I kind of took one of the questions from a math Olympiad test. This was something called Bay Area Math Olympiad in back in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I posed that question to ChatGPT. So clearly, like this was a question that the model must not have seen before. The model should not have seen in its training data set. The model did not provide the right answer. It had some flaws in its reasoning, but it kind of gave enough directions so that if somebody is reasonably good at those kinds of problems, you can kind of pick up on that and do and solve that yourself. So kind of the point is that uh, these because of the current ongoing shift in the market realities, it's extremely important for all of us to focus not just purely on highly technical and highly well specified skills. So those skills are likely to become less valuable, especially with more and more advancements in various AI models. And of course, I think I kind of touched upon the second point already. So the third point is more like just like a startup. If there is a startup, and if that startup has to get funded and has to get customers and grow, it needs to provide some value which is differentiating compared to status quo or differentiating compared to competitors. In some sense, the same thing can be said to apply to each one of us. How do we kind of differentiate ourselves? Uh, and it's not that simple. At least my reflection is that I used to think that my strengths are in maybe analytical skills, but in hindsight, I think that it may not necessarily be just an analytical skill so much. It's more of being able to work well with people from many different backgrounds and many different maybe perspectives. Like sometimes that might be more important. At least I think that that is a skill that I have, which it took me a long time to realize that that is a skill that I took for granted, but not everybody might possess that skill. So kind of like figuring out how to differentiate yourself. And that is something that you have to figure out, because for each one of us, that path and that journey could be different. Uh, so kind of the second point I want to touch upon from this book, which has lots of interesting aspects, is the importance of professional networking. Um, so just to share my own experience, so I have been working in mostly tech companies after finishing my BTech here and later PhD in computer science. So what I've noticed is that tech is a quite a small world. By this, what I mean is I have encountered many circumstances where somebody who I worked together with at one company uh, was there at some other company that I joined, or maybe I might have collaborated with someone at a company where I interviewed, and almost 15 years later, we end up being in the same group or same company. And so kind of like from that angle, building relationships and kind of maintaining and strengthening them is quite important. Given that many domains like tech or other domains tend to be quite well connected, it's not a good idea to burn bridges, build bridges rather than burning bridges, because it's kind of like eventually like you are likely to encounter the same set of folks over time again and again. And that's what I mean by the second point. Relationships matter. In fact, this is one of the uh, principles or leadership principles at LinkedIn. And the third point is a quote that I heard in the context of the lab that I worked at being getting shut down. So after my PhD, I joined Microsoft Research in Bay Area. It's called the Microsoft Research Silicon Valley Lab. So I was there for 8 years, and one fine day, completely out of the blue, completely with nobody expecting, we got to know that the lab was being shut down, and all of us, around 70 or 80 of us, were being laid off. And the exception was the bar to retain the job was to have a Turing Award, and there are 2 or 3 Turing Award recipients, and they kind of continued to stay with the company. So kind of the the quote that I heard here is again the same. Like um, often companies might do certain actions, or a company might be prominent today, but 5 years later that company may not be as prominent, or that company might have different market realities, market requirements. But it's important to remember that the people relationships stay on, especially as you move from one company to another. Like the people relationships often stay on, and even for that matter too, it's very important to not underestimate the power of networking. And this, by power of networking, I mean being intentional in kind of connecting with folks from many different backgrounds, being intentional in kind of building and maintaining, say, a LinkedIn or similar profiles and so forth, and kind of building those relationships is quite important. Um, I'll kind of come back to this a little bit later. It's kind of really interesting that from the perspective of each of one as individuals, it's very important to build and leverage our network as much as possible. But there is a flip side to this that will discuss later. Um, this is the second book that we were given. This notion of the thinking of companies and employees as more like an alliance rather than like a family, or like some companies tend to say that we are like a family and so forth. But the reality is that when times are great, companies often say that we are all one family. Let's be loyal to each other, and let's give our best. Let's kind of sacrifice everything else for the sake of the company. But kind of the reality is more like these are more like the alliances, right? Like alliance meaning maybe you kind of do give your best to whatever you are working on. This could be your own startup, this could be working at some other company and so forth. But when the time is ripe, when maybe there are better opportunities for you, or if the company thinks that there may be better opportunities employing somebody else, things might change. So kind of viewing this relationship as an alliance and kind of working based on that is always a good idea. um, so it, it, uh, this was something that I noticed back during the COVID time. There was an article in the Harvard Business Review where they noticed that because of work from home and COVID related isolation, we were kind of losing our connections. Uh, we were kind of losing all the serendipitous conversations that would happen in maybe when you're kind of getting tea, or right, getting snacks and things like that, all the water cooler conversations. And as a result, they observed that the both the personal and professional networks shrunk by around 200 people during the pandemic time. Uh, so this, hopefully this has improved now that we are kind of meeting in settings like this, where we are meeting with others on a frequent basis. But this is something also to keep in mind, especially as you start your careers, especially as you kind of consider the consider the kind of the pros and cons of working remotely versus like meeting your team members, meeting others in serendipitous and having serendipitous conversations. This is going to be important. So kind of keep this in mind, even though having a completely flexible and remote working arrangement might be extremely convenient given all the traffic conditions and other realities. There are also trade-offs and downsides. So kind of the second aspect I want to touch upon is this notion of risk versus reward. Um, so kind of like one way to think of this is when you take up, say, some jobs, or when you move from one job to another, always think of some kind of, do you want to optimize for the immediate or short term versus the long term? uh, by this, what I mean to say is that often there is a saying, when you consider your next role, whether it's your maybe next role in academic settings, maybe doing higher studies, or joining a new company and so forth, think roughly like 2 steps ahead, meaning how does think about how the role you are taking up could help you towards the role afterwards, right? So if you think in those terms, there may be a potential trade-off between what you may not get immediately versus what you can get later. Say a classic example of this is choosing to be part of a startup or very small organization versus very large company. Typically, like the 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 monetary compensation may be larger at a larger company compared to a startup. So in the short term, you are getting a greater reward at a larger company. But if you think in terms of the level of learning and possibly level of career growth, uh, chances are that that might be higher in a startup setting. Again, like these are just very rough. It depends on a lot of other factors. Is the startup working on something that the market really cares about? Is the How is the culture and the team at the startup? Is the startup well funded? Are you in a situation where you need stability of the job, and that is something that you need to prioritize over uh, going through the extremely ups and downs of being at a startup? There are lots of factors, but this is an example. So likewise, even if you are considering, say, two opportunities, and the opportunity X maybe pays a little bit less than opportunity Y. So think about which of these two might be better from a longer term optimization, even though in the immediate term it might sound like taking up the second opportunity is better. And the another way of thinking about this is the opportunity cost of what you are doing. Um, so think you can kind of think of whatever you are doing today uh, with respect to the opportunity cost. Um, in if in kind of continuing what you are doing, there is something that you may be potentially missing out on. So it's good to think in terms of what that might be. Or likewise, like in choosing to take up a different role, there is something that you are letting go. Like think in terms of what is the opportunity cost, what is the thing that you would be, what is the counterfactual, what does the counterfactual look like, and how does the status quo compare to the counterfactual, or vice versa. So that might also be a good way of thinking. And sometimes, like even in terms of companies, it's good to think in terms of what is the opportunity cost of that company or that group being not existent. By this I mean, say if you want to really care about uh, companies that are really impactful or creating a lot of value for the society, what would a world look like if this company as well as all of its competitors were not present? How much void would we feel in the society or the world? That could give you a feel for how much value that company or that group is perhaps creating or contributing to the society. Um, so let me kind of share my own experience with respect to this short-term versus long-term reward. So I'm going to show some uh, plot. This is the how the stock price of some company looked like. Any guesses on what this company could be? It's probably like this very little information. This could be any. This looks like any company. Yeah, the guess is Tesla. No, this Tesla could have looked like this at some point, but this is not Tesla. Okay, let me add some dates. I hope this gives some more context. So this, just for those who cannot read, this is 2016, and this drop happened around February, and the increase where the price doubled happened around June. The guess is Facebook. Close enough. No, it's not Facebook. Yes, it was LinkedIn. The reason I showed this is that I was part of LinkedIn from 2014 to 2019, and given that at many tech companies, a good part of the compensation is in the form of stock awards. When this happened, right? So that was a period of lot of turmoil within the company, right? Like there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't suddenly we all the unvested stocks have kind of plummeted in value. Like uh, from a very myopic perspective, from a very short term angle, it looks like you need to exit, right? You need to, given your skills and given what how much the market cared about you until this point. Uh, so this drop means that you can go somewhere else where you can get a significantly higher compensation, right? So this is again like this again um, uh, uh, just reflective. There's no science behind this. Um, at least for me, I felt that um, the most impactful contributions that I was able to do at LinkedIn happened after this point, meaning over the subsequent years at LinkedIn. So it's always this kind of counterfactual analysis is often hard. It's quite possible that if I had joined some other company around this time, I could have done uh, even better than this. But kind of the point is that don't emphasize too much on the short term, because the short term with any company, especially like smaller companies, there tends to be a lot of fluctuation in, if it is publicly traded, these kinds of fluctuations, or if it is private companies, even more fluctuations. Especially startups, often there's wild fluctuations in the perceived market capital or perceived worth of the company. So again, that is something. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just giving this example as an illustration of what this short-term versus long-term trade-offs could be. Um, all right. So the third aspect I want to go into is this notion of uh, grit and curiosity. So this is a quote from I think Andrew Ng, from almost like maybe 8 years ago. Um, he, so as many of you may know, Andrew Ng, I believe, was the co-founder of Google Brain, and subsequently uh, co-founded Coursera and many other companies. Right, he's a prominent uh, expert in the field of artificial intelligence. Um, so here he says, I kind of recommend people to take on projects where you have you just have about 70% of the qualifications, uh, because that gives you incentive, and that forces you to learn the remaining 30%. So imagine a setting where you already have all the skills that you need for the job. You might still learn new things, but that incremental learning may not be substantial. Uh, Versus like if you kind of think roughly along these lines, you have reasonable amount of skills. You have enough skills to make contributions to the job. It's not as though you just have 20% of the required skills. You have like maybe 70% of the skills, but the rest you can kind of always learn on the fly. This is again a quote from an interview, podcast interview between Reid Hoffman and Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google. And in the context of Google's recruiting, he says that persistence is the single biggest predictor of future success for those who joined Google. And his message is that they look for two things: persistence or grit. And the second is curiosity, right? Is somebody willing to learn new things, and is somebody kind of being willing to persist and work hard. Persistent here does not mean just doing the same thing again and again if something doesn't work. It means that you're kind of willing to work hard, not give up, but adapt as needed. So maybe you try something once or twice and realize that that's probably not the right approach. You kind of adapt, but not give up easily, right? That's what they mean by persistence here. So kind of like an analogy I can think of for what Andrew says earlier is something like how children learn anything new. In the field of learning, meaning educational learning, there is this notion called zone of proximal development. So what this means is, say, imagine this is what the skills that a child has currently acquired. So the child can do these skills without any help. Uh, then this is a band, right? This is what is called the zone of proximal development. These are the things that the child can do with some guidance. These are things that the child or the person learning cannot do. These are too far. So if you go back to Andrew's comment, it's something similar. Like if you already have some skills, maybe step out of the comfort zone, take up something maybe more challenging, and you can kind of learn on the fly. So the other thing that I learned at some point is this notion of viewing each event. This could be a meeting, this could be like maybe unfavorable circumstances, right? Maybe things like the lab getting suddenly shut down, or maybe the company kind of having lot of fluctuations because of stock price and lot of flex because of people leaving the company and so forth. So think of each of this as an opportunity to learn, rather than, and kind of like if you have that mindset, there's something that you can kind of pick up from any instance. And related to that, I in the past, whenever I went to, say, technical conferences like computer science research conferences, I would often focus on meeting people who had a lot more experience than me. But at some point I realized that that's not the optimal thing, right? There's so much I can learn from anyone. It doesn't have to be somebody who has more experience than me. This is really nicely captured in this book called the book by Chip Conley, Wisdom at Work. The context is that he was the CEO of a very successful boutique hotel, and when he was around 50 or 55 years old, he decided to do something different. He was invited to be a mentor to the Airbnb founders, and in this book he shares his experience, and what he says is that learn to marry wisdom and experience with curiosity, a beginner's mind, and a willingness to evolve. And this is very true today, even more, like especially given the rate at which new technologies are emerging. Chances are that somebody who is learning those today, like many of you in as part of your courses, has a lot more skills on that compared to somebody who's kind of just who is kind of in a work setting already, right? So there's so much that each of us can learn from others, especially those who may have less experience or more experience. It doesn't really matter. So again, like wanted to share some quotes that I have heard from others. The first one is more like, in many companies there is this notion that within the individual contributor ladder there is this notion of technical fellow, which is often one of the highest roles. And the quote here is that you don't become a technical fellow by just following instructions from your manager. It's kind of almost obvious, like you need to figure out what would bring that kind of impact. Somebody else is not going to tell you what needs to be done to be kind of exceptionally regarded at any organization. This is true of companies and in pretty much most organizations. Let me skip the rest. So I want to come back to the networking, the aspect that I mentioned. So even though from a perspective of each one of us, building strong networks and leveraging them is very important, there is a flip side, which is that when you are in a role where you are kind of you are hiring others, be conscious of the homophily that's present in our personal as well as professional networks. By homophily, what I mean is we tend to know a lot more people like us in both our personal and professional networks. This is just a reality. It's just the way, because of the way we may have grown up, the way where the countries where we studied, the people we have interacted with and so forth. This is broadly true. So this means that if you take the easy route, let's say if there is a job posting that you want to fill one in your team at some point, if you post the job on, say, something like LinkedIn, it's an easy route. uh, it'll still kind of help you get enough leads, potential prospective candidates, but the downside is that it won't reach people who are very different from you but have all the necessary skills needed for the job. And the point I was trying to emphasize here is that many studies have shown that having diversity along not only demographic dimensions but also diversity of perspectives and so forth helps improve the financial returns at a company. There are many studies showing this. So from this angle, it's very important to ensure that there is sufficient diversity at a company level or at a team level in terms of demographics, perspectives, and so forth. So be kind of intentional in choosing what channels you would use to reach out about opportunities. So kind of finally, like, just hear multiple perspectives. Don't so whatever I shared so far is just my own personal perspective. So everybody's experience will be different. So hear multiple perspectives. Let me spend a few minutes just sharing some early thoughts on what is the coming wave of AI could mean for many of this. So a few years back, almost like 8 years back, there was a really insightful op-ed written by Kai-Fu Lee in New York Times, titled "The Real Threat of Artificial Intelligence." Again, like, Kai-Fu Lee is not like yet another, say, journalist. He used to head Microsoft Research Asia, the Beijing lab in the past, and he worked at Google in China as well, and then he has been extremely successful in China. And in this article, he was kind of discussing what are, in his views, the challenges he worries about AI. And specifically, like, he was making this comment that in the past, if you look at, say, the book by Nandan Nilekani on India, there is this emphasis on demographic advantage and demographic dividend, right? In any country, as a country goes through demographic dividend, so long as the workforce is well trained, it was always considered a huge asset for the economic growth. Here in this article, Kai-Fu was arguing that while a large growing population is often viewed as an economic asset, in the age of AI, it will actually be an economic liability, because he argues in this article that AI will result in a lot of job displacement. And he also then goes into some philosophical discussion about what would this mean between countries which have powerful AI-based companies. Back in 2017, he talks about US and China as having the world's 7 largest tech companies or so. And what is it going to be between those companies and those nations and the nations that do not have those? He discusses things like countries like US and China can afford to heavily tax these AI companies in case those AI companies are extracting most of the wealth or generating most of the wealth. But he asks this rhetorical question: what about the rest of the world? What about countries like India? What about countries in Africa and so forth? So I want to start from a very pessimistic opinion. And more recently, you may have seen articles like this, where this is again another article written by one of the respected journalists at New York Times, where he says that there is almost like, for recent graduates, there are not enough jobs. And so here in this article, the author claims that the unemployment rate for recent college graduates has jumped, especially because companies are using AI for more of the entry-level tasks, the tasks that don't require a lot of context, a lot of experience, and so forth. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the specifics. He says one tech executive recently told me that his company had stopped hiring anything below this is level 5 software engineer because some of the lower levels can be done using GitHub Copilot and other AI based tools. Um, so, and this is another article. So this is talking about recent US college grads, but these kinds of things might be true in many parts of the world. And they give an example of maybe Duolingo's one of the chief executives saying that asking everybody to leverage AI as part of their work and see first check whether some task can be done with AI before making a case that you need to hire somebody to do the job. So there are these kinds of articles, and this is again a plot from from the labor market trends for the recent college graduates. And this is, even though the data is from just within US, it's probably gives some feel for what's happening in this. From the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, they argue that if you look at the recent college graduates, which is the blue line, it is kind of the unemployment rate is going up, versus like those who are more experienced, it's kind of not going as much up. So there are kind of these kinds of both qualitative and quantitative arguments, and this is also another really fantastic book written by the co-founder of DeepMind and Inflection, Mustafa Sulaiman. So in this book, they talk about a lot of effects of AI and synthetic biology, but for the purpose of this talk, they do go into some of the task displacement or job displacement related challenges. So kind of like they kind of portray a little bit pessimistic or kind of a perspective of how do we kind of contain and guide AI, synthetic biology, and other technologies before they surpass our ability to control them, right? So they're kind of framing more in a little bit pessimistic sense. But I want to kind of end this talk on a more optimistic note. As you can see by now, I'm a huge fan of Reid Hoffman's books and articles. So this is a recent book written by Reid called Super Agency. If you get a chance, please take a look at the book. So by super agency, he refers to AI amplifying human decision making, AI acting as a partner rather than a replacement in complex situations. He gives lots of examples of this. He kind of charts out almost a path of how we as individuals, how we as societies, how we as nations can craft policies that will kind of guide us towards a future where individuals and societies are empowered and better equipped to solve various global challenges rather than worrying about job displacements or task displacements. He gives lots of examples. About 50 or 60 years back, when computers were introduced, there was a huge resistance from the financial services sector, from the banking industry, because people feared that all those jobs, clerical jobs, will be lost. But the reality has been very different. And the hope is that this is going to be the case for AI-based change as well. There are going to be likely a lot of new opportunities kind of enabled or opened up because of these technologies. It's just that we all need to adapt and learn and kind of keep an eye on what skills are becoming more and more important. So I would also highly encourage you to listen to this long conversation with Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. This is a podcast conversation with Dwarkesh Patel. And in this podcast, amongst other things, Satya talks about his take on leveraging AI in his day-to-day professional life. He says that I use AI to I think with AI, but then discuss with the rest of the team. So kind of when he is looking at something, he kind of thinks with AI, meaning various AI chatbots and so forth, uses those to get some feedback, to kind of refine his thoughts and so forth, and then kind of discuss with the rest of the team. This is something that I have been trying to internalize. Like, just to give an example, even for this talk, it's kind of quite unnatural for me to start with an AI, like start with asking ChatGPT or Perplexity or others about like giving an outline of the talk. It's for all of you, for many of you who are kind of digital natives or even AI natives, it may be more natural. So this is, again, I think this is going to be something that we all need to be a lot more intentional. Things that we kind of used to do in the past and consume a lot of time, or becoming things that can be done more efficiently using AI. And if we adopt that perspective, so things will be a lot better. So so kind of like, I think let me just conclude by saying that my prediction is that things which are uniquely human qualities will become lot more and more important. Things like empathy or things like building strong networks will become more important than purely analytical skills. Identifying what problems should be solved is going to be more important than solving a problem that somebody else asks you to solve. So I think that skill is going to be important. Figuring out how to handle unexpected scenarios in any circumstance will be important. I think that extremely well specified tasks are more and more likely to be automated. A thought experiment is, imagine one individual conveying the task description to another individual from a very different cultural context with no context about the task. If the task can be done in this fashion, where somebody provides a written instruction and somebody else executes that, chances are that those kinds of tasks are likely to be more and more automated. But the point is, tasks are the one which are likely to be automated, not jobs. We will have people, same person performing a job more efficiently, where a lot of subtasks would get automated as opposed to the job itself getting necessarily displaced. So let me conclude with this, and there are some references you can just search and you can find most of this. So let me stop here. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful lecture. We now open the floor for a Q&A session.
Yes. Let me just repeat the question. So I kind of mentioned about the importance of diversity, not only of demographic diversity, but also diversity of perspectives and so forth. The question is more like, how do you kind of balance that with the need for cultural fit, especially in a small team? I think that's a great question. So uh, I, I I think perhaps that the cultural fit and the making sure that the team is cohesive and coherent, collectively can achieve what it's supposed to do, is perhaps the most important. And the argument in these kinds of studies is that having a diverse team can actually enhance that, in the sense that it can bring perspectives that otherwise could have been blind spots. If all the people working on a team have nearly identical experiences, then chances are that there are likely to be blind spots. They may not they may not be aware of things that the end users, the customers might care about because of the lack of their own experiences. So again, like there are many ways, solutions around this. It doesn't necessarily have to be ensuring perfect diversity or whatever that means in each and every team. It could be being more intentional. It could be being intentional in knowing that given the current team, there is a need to talk to people who are very different from you, especially if your customer base, the people who are going to use the product that you're building are very different from that team itself. Being intentional in assessing the needs, being intentional in understanding what the end users care about. I think that those could be potential ways to address in case some small team, say in a startup setting, does not have all those kind of perspectives.
Correct.
Hello, sir. As you told us, like you have majorly focused on the areas where you to be analyzed and solved on. But considering the situation right now, considering the entry level, where it's always expected from us to solve a particular problem, more than analyzing it where it has to be solved, right? How do we bridge this gap, or how do we make it like a open space where even at the entry level to grow faster, we are expected to stand in the space what you're expecting us to do?
So kind of like, yeah, I think there are a few ways to look at this. Like, say, suppose that yeah, you take up an entry level role, and because of the nature of that role, there is an expectation of uh, having to solve some specific task. Or there may be, when you join a job, there may be some initial starter project, like just a warm up project and so forth. But kind of always reflect on what are the ways to maybe extend that, what are the ways that could have been done better, or possibly even could that problem itself have been phrased better, even if you have to do what you have been asked to do because this is part of the team and this is the missing lego piece that you are bringing in. So think along those lines. Another way to address this might be, say suppose you're working on some area, like you are working on maybe something like working on, say, self-driving vehicles. So see whether there may be meetups in wherever you are located on that topic, so that you can meet others from possibly other organizations with similar interests. So you can kind of maybe have share your thoughts, share your experiences, learn from other speakers and so forth. So I think there are many ways of building that network, or kind of going beyond what you have been asked to do, even if it may not be in that context of that exact job. Or let's say you are working on something, but your aspiration is to become an expert on some adjacent topic, then you can kind of think of that as more like a hobby project and try to do something on your own. There are, compared to how things were maybe 30 or 40 years back, there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of materials online and so forth to do those.
Ms. Sujata, VP, Institutional Advancement Office, to give a memento as a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a lead from the campus.
Thank you.